best known as Woody to all of us. Or that guy that's sitting out in Wayne Fleming's field opposite our house all the time. That one.
That one.
So welcome, Woody.
Thank you. But I have to start with a story. So Diane Pierce will recognize this.
I gave it to him.
Well, one day I park in Perry McDonald's house, at his house, right near where she picks up honey, and I was coming back in wearing this, and Diane came out with 3 jars of honey, and she turned like this, and she almost dropped the honey. I'd like to thank Janet Scott, actually, because she did invite me along with the museum board, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. Welcome, everyone. And I'd like to dedicate my talk tonight to Peter Large. So Peter was a mentor, and what that meant to me was it might be a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon when Peter and Margaret were living on the island. I could call up and say, Peter, is it okay if I come over? And more than often than not, he invited me over, and I sometimes would take pictures or I'd take the iPad, but lots of times I'd take pictures with me, printed pictures, and we talk about art. And I learned a lot, and I listened, so he was special. And I think Margaret is very supportive now too, and sometimes I visit Margaret doing the same thing. So the part about light is photographers paint with light. And so I'm always chasing light. But the part where Peter comes in is every time I would show him an image, he would say, well, what's the story? And I'd say, oh, it's beauty, Peter. And I would say that a few times until I realized that wasn't satisfying Peter. And so you work at that. And it's an ongoing project because it's not an easy one to pull off, especially with wildlife. Street photography may be a little easier, you know, you can find the story in the street, but again, I keep looking and searching. And so those two things. So a little later on as I go along, you'll hear me refer to light as very important. My background initially in high school, I bought my first camera, which was a film camera. I had a dark room in my parents' house. Now the difference between wildlife photography and some other forms of photography is that you have control in, say, portraiture with light, and you can control your subject. Your landscape is there, you can pick your time of day. Wildlife is a little unique. So what I have to do is I have to think about observe the wildlife and figure out, especially the bird life, what are they doing, when do they fly, when do they feed, when are they active. So lots of times owls are active maybe at one particular time. Seabirds might be flying all day. Then you think about and light and whatnot from that perspective. Lots of times it depends on what shows up too. So when I'm traveling, sometimes Judy researches where the local wildlife preserves are, and then we'll usually arrive around 2 in the afternoon, and I'll go out and I'll try to figure out where the best place to sit is in terms of light, wind. Birds always take off into the wind. They usually fly into the wind. They hunt into the wind. And these guys, the otters, will just pop up.
Is that a gannet?
Yeah. Camera is the main tool. And cameras are basically now computers. And they can be very complicated. But my camera and lens is set up for wildlife, so it's 600 millimeters. So I have a long reach and I can get close in. and sometimes they come close into me. But the camera will take, and this is the technical part, sorry, the camera will take 30 frames a second. And I can shoot very, very fast, but usually shoot at about 1/5000th of a second, so it can freeze birds in flight. So normally, the average person traveling along front road doesn't catch the image. Sometimes when they're sitting, I just have to find them, right, the snowy owls and whatnot, but basically I can be quite a distance away, and the camera also grabs a lot of information, so that means I can crop in. And you always have to do that with wildlife and stuff, because you're never really on top of them unless you're lucky. Sometimes they come in close when I'm sitting in a photo blind. Some of the birds move very fast, and if they're flying at you, you need 1/5000th of a second, sometimes 1/8000th of a second, just to catch them in mid-flight like that. And normally we don't see the details, so we get to see, unless they'll come in close. Sometimes if you're just sitting still in that outfit and you don't move, they don't see you. Motion is one of the first things they pick up on, and of course sound. Camera also picks up the eye of the bird, so it will automatically track the eyes of the bird. So I'm taking that shot, there's no way that I could see on my lens or through my viewfinder the actual eye to focus on it. So it will automatically focus and grab the eye. So you can see the eye is in focus on the bird, and it's doing that all the time as that bird's flying towards me and I'm catching some of the shots. And then I try to catch shots where, you know, they're hunting and they're going straight down. So when I talk about my process, usually the night before, I'll look at the weather, because weather is everything. And especially with the owls, if it's really windy, a snowy owl won't be up flying. The short-eared owls are not out at all, so they look for light air, and usually they like some light because they like to hunt, but they hunt late afternoon. The harriers are up in the wind, so they're actually, sometimes they're moving slower because they're actually hovering in the wind to hunt. But, so I'm looking at light and wind direction. So I want to be positioned where the wind is at my back or off to my side. So when a harrier's out hunting, that harrier's flying towards me. The other thing I need to do too is be well dressed. So in the winter time, I can sit out for as much as an hour, but it's the wind. So if the wind is cold, then no. But now I got to the point where I'm using blinds more. So the blind offers me protection, and I put the blinds in. The blinds are usually facing away from the sun, either morning or afternoon, or I have a choice depending on the openings in the blind. And that offers me the protection and gives me more time. I still have to keep my hands warm, and in the cold weather, I have my face close to the viewfinder, and I have to be careful because I fog up the viewfinder, and then I'm really lost when that snowy owl flies by.
Woody,
Yes.
what is your blind made of?
Usually I buy the hunting blinds at Canadian Tire. So it's like a nylon that's camo,
Oh,
and then it has zippers or clips in it, and sometimes screening so that the blinds are always dark inside so that light doesn't reflect, so the bird can't generally see you. Even though wildlife is unpredictable, you can kind of predict it to a certain extent. So by positioning and direction of the sun, the sunrise, during the total eclipse and the eclipse on the island, I kind of knew, looking at the weather, that I wasn't going to get a clear view of the eclipse. Like, it was pretty cloudy, and you probably had to go all the way down to Cornwall to get that. So in the back of my mind, I always had this thought, maybe, just maybe, if I went into the blind, and the blind is situated where I know there are short-eared owls, but it was, the short ears had moved on, most of them, but there were a few around. And so I sat, and then by sitting in a blind, you don't see the sky so much, but then it's more dramatic when that light started to drop. And then in the blind, you also listen more, so it's like a meditation. And the light, and it started to get cooler, and then I saw a short-eared owl, and then I saw two, and then maybe even three. And they started to hunt, because they hunt when the light, I can't explain it, but the light is just at a certain level where maybe they can see better, they're not getting as much reflection off the grasses and whatnot, but they started to hunt. If I talk about light, at sunrise and sunset, the light's always coming low, and it's a special light. Late day and early morning is a very, very soft light basically, from this angle, except during an eclipse, that soft light is from above. So this is like once in 70 years, you can get a shot of a short-eared owl where it's lit from a soft light from above. And so, like, it was magical. I had 400 shots, and they hunted leading up to the total eclipse, and then everything got silent. The birds stopped singing, the owls landed in the grasses. I couldn't see where they land, because as soon as these guys land, they disappear. And then as soon as the light started coming up popped one, and they started hunting again. And then after about 50 minutes or so, they went away, they went to roost again. So the short-eared owls tend to, that's what they do, they tend to only come out in light air and late day. But occasionally I see them early morning. But the catch with photography is you need light to grab the image. And so early morning, and the difference between a camera and my eyes is when I'm walking into the field, in Wayne's field, across from Janet's there, and I'm out half hour before sunrise, the light is just starting to come up over, well, it's just glowing in the sky. Well, I can see the grasses. If you've ever been out that time of day, you can, your eyes can pick it up. It's the detail in the shadows. There's not a chance the camera can do that. So it has to be a little bit later, and the camera has to be set so it's sensitive to that low light, but then you lose the detail. And it's large because to let more light in. So you can have telephoto lenses that are a bit smaller this way, but then you're not capturing the same detail and the same image earlier in the day, because the catch-22 is I might be shooting at 3200th of a second. You're not shooting at 1/100th of a second where you take a picture of the bird and it's just a bit of a blur. So you're kind of wrestling with that. Questions?
What do you usually set your ISO when you're
Well,
doing
the
that
ISO,
45,000?
so this is a technical thing. So ISO is technically the speed of the sensitivity of the sensor. So the ISO represents how sensitive the sensor is to light. The more sensitive it is, the less detail per se. So, but my ISOs now, because we have software that will take out noise, and noise is it's electronic noise, so it's not to the picture, but it's just because it's not grabbing as much detail in, because there's less light. So yeah, 5,000 at the back.
What about f-stops and depth of field? Are some of your photos part of birds in focus and some's drifting out and stuff? Is that?
Yeah, well, yeah, the catch with, again, technical, depth of field and f-stop. So f-stop, the smaller the number, the larger the opening in the lens, therefore letting less light in. But the larger the opening in the lens, you only get a small amount of the picture in focus. So the bird and maybe a little bit of the wing, but then all the background is faded out. But you tend to have to, as a wildlife photographer, you are shooting as large as f-stop, or a larger opening as small f-stop. So this is a 600 millimeter f4. So that's why it's so large. But then that offers you, it's the difference of f4 to f5.6 is like twice the light, I think. So So, yeah, all the images tend to be that way, unless it's like I can get it up to f7.1 sometimes and give me a little more depth of field kind of later in the day. So,
So you basically sacrifice depth of field to get.
yeah, it's always a sacrifice. There's something you give, right? There's no perfect camera, and there's no perfect setting in my mind. You just kind of play with it.
So that rig you've got set up there, what does it weigh? I mean, presumably you have
About
to use
12 pounds.
You have to use it on a tripod all the time, do you?
Yeah, I actually can't really I can hand hold it, but it's too heavy. Like, you know, you have to, now, and cameras are set up now where in lens and in the camera, they actually compensate for motion. So a lot of photographers and wildlife photographers can do this, and they get practiced at it, but I never, not with something of this size. I can hand hold like smaller ones, but it's just, and this is like when you have to think about if you're hiking somewhere and you're carrying it over your shoulder. Like I went to Guatemala and hiked up the side of a mountain for about an hour to get to a spot where there was a quetzal, which is a national bird of Guatemala. And there was no way I didn't even take this to Guatemala because I'd never be able to carry it that far. So it's a bit of a catch-22.
But you got your Quetzal on your birthday.
Yeah, on a smaller lens, yeah, on a smaller lens, right?
Yeah, marvelous, yeah.
And an interesting little fact, what I haven't talked about is iPhones and cell phones. But the technology is pretty good on the iPhones. And so the guide, I was just with one guide and myself. He was Guatemalan, and you know, he didn't have a lot of money, but what he had was a good cell phone and then a little lens that would attach. Actually, no, he put his cell phone on a scope, a bird scope. And he was able to get shots, really nice shots, because, you know, you use whatever technology you have to get the shot. And this is something that Peter mentioned to me too many times was, it's all about the image. You're trying to grab the best image you can, whatever you're shooting. It's all about the image. How you get there, yeah, it might be important to some. Yeah, I hiked up the mountain, but still, can you get that image, right? Yes, Bobby?
Have you always kept photography in your life from the beginning, right through all your careers? Or did you come back to it?
No, so what happened was, yeah, high
With Peter,
school
maybe?
and School of Architecture, we had a really good dark room at Carleton University. So, and I was using photography in some of my projects and stuff for architecture. And then after school, then, you know, I became a contractor and I kind of dropped off, and it was only, I think it was 2012, Molly might remember, but there was a art tour of the island. And I was, at that time, I started taking pictures in Guatemala because I was fascinated by taking pictures of Guatemalans, basically, people on the street. And so that's different than wildlife, right? And that's kind of, you have to be a little bit more out there because you approach people that they don't even speak your language and you don't speak theirs, but you have to interact with them and get permission to take a photo. And the Mayan culture in Guatemala, a photo usually to them represents stealing of the soul. So it's even more serious, right? So and sometimes they'll want money, which is fine, but to be able to, and it's a real challenge, right? To take a picture of a person and not have them stiffen up, right? So I found that a challenge, and so I think that art show in 2012, I had a number of shots. So that was about when I started getting back into it. Yes.
You you must have millions of pictures to go through. How do you, when you take 400 in a 10-minute period, how do you?
I'm actually a minimalist, so it's kind of interesting. So these cameras, you know, like they grab 30 frames a second, but I might only shoot at 20 frames. But it's only when I'm depressing the shutter, right? So there's a back button on the camera that when I depress it, it will autofocus. So I can follow the bird or follow the subject and it's auto-focusing, and then I'll hit down and shoot a few and then shoot a few. So I'm not, so that when I get back to the computer, and the computer will display those images kind of in a grid. So sometimes you're looking at the images from a bit of a distance, so you can grab the image that kind of jumps out off the screen at you, which is one that'll be closer to good exposure and probably more in focus. But then I talk about telling a story. So how do you tell a story with an image? Well, one of the ways you can do it is you grab all these images, and then today I posted an image of a male merganser on Facebook coming in for a landing with the web feed out. Well, I had a choice of maybe 10 in that sequence. Camera puts them all in focus, birds coming in, and then I can look at them and go, yeah, that one tells the best story, which was where the bird was freaked out. Web feed out like this. And a distance away, but still, and then you pick it out and then you crop it, et cetera, et cetera. You just get it right to tell the story. But yeah, I don't like to have too many, and I will, even when I'm out in the field, because you're sitting, I generally sit for 2.5 hours. So I have it set up on the camera where I can review images, and just one double tap of a button gets rid of it. Like the bird's out of the picture frame, or the wing is out of the frame. Well, that's no good to me, so it's gone, right? So yeah, you could spend a little time doing that. You want to keep the person looking at your picture, your art, you want to keep them interested in the frame. So simple things like, if you have a picture, and if you have this picture here, and maybe you have a little something there, you don't want the eyes to be drawn to that. You want the eyes to go to your subject. So you have to pay attention to things like that. Other things, foreground, middle ground, background. So maybe your subject is in the foreground, maybe it's in the middle ground, but you give the viewer those 3 layers. So it puts the subject in context. So it's a bit tricky when you have a bird that's just in flight. It has to be a really strong image to work. Otherwise, you try to give it some sort of context and background, and that comes into where you place your blind or where I sit. So I don't always sit in blinds. I will sit just out in the field in a little chair down in the bushes, and I always sit with something behind me, a bush behind me, but I'm always thinking about, okay, the bird's maybe going to be flying up the river, or the kingfisher's going to be hunting the river. Then I'm looking for background too, so I'm not just thinking about grabbing the bird. If I can, I set the blind up so that I actually have a really good looking fence post right over there. And chances are a meadowlark is going to land on the fence post. Maybe you're out there for 2 hours, you don't see a short-eared owl, but you see that meadowlark for about 5 seconds. And that's all you got. Lens on it, focus, he's gone. But it's all about the context, right? You put the bird in context. So that's a bit of a challenge in wildlife, where on street photography, a bit of a challenge, but you can do it, right? You give the person, whoever the shot, what context. So it relates, people relate to it more, right? You're telling that story through context. Yeah.
So, last 11 or 12 years, you've been focusing on wildlife photography. What one incident stands out in your mind if you think back and say, what was the most interesting, exciting, or memorable event at that point?
There's a couple things. The first time I was sitting in the Kingston Field Naturalist site, and it was -10, bit of a breeze blowing off the lake, but I was in behind a bush. And I'm not seeing anything, and it's been an hour, it's been a half an hour, 40 minutes. I'm thinking, a snowy owl could fly by any time now. unbelievably, like 5 minutes later, a snowy flies by. And I'm so freaked out that I forget to press the thing. I got her in focus and she's going by. And I never forgot that, right? You don't forget stuff like that. But it's all in here, right? And I still picture it. And she wasn't looking at me. She was looking to the north because there was a raven that was bothering her and pissing her off somewhere in a tree over there. Way off over in the middle of, and she just flew by looking north. So, but then last year, female snowy, that one picture of the snowy coming out, was in the field, Wayne's field. And you kind of get to know where they kind of hang out. As soon as they kind of come in, and they'll stay in an area, and they hunt a certain area. Well, she became my girlfriend. Judy was a bit jealous, but she knew that it was a feathered friend. And I would walk in, and you wouldn't see her, right? She'd be way on a fence post, probably 700 feet away. I'd walk in, I'd settle in this and sit down, and I'd look over across the next fence line over, and there she is sitting. And so I just set up, and I just keep an eye on her, lens on her, but I'm watching for other stuff. And sure enough, female harrier landed 30 feet from me. I can't believe this, because the harriers are not as astute as the owls. Lands and is kind of looking around, like maybe it missed a vole or something, and I'm looking at it, and I'm taking some shots. I look up, and the snowy's not there. Shit! Swing the lens over, and I'm looking for her, and she's flying straight at me. And she'd come straight at me, and so I'm getting at maybe 20 frames a second, boom, 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 coming at me, come right at me, looked down at me and turned and flew to the north. And like you get tears in your eyes, right? Because you're this bird knows you're there and probably, knew I was sitting in the bushes over there and just went, I better go check this guy out. Well, that same snowy, I had that happen 4 times. So the next time I positioned myself in a different spot, it was the same bird. She was hanging out in the area, flew almost at me again. As she's going by, I'm getting really, really nice shots. And the last time I was sitting in a snowdrift, looking at her a couple 100 feet away, focused on her, and she's really not looking at me, but kind of looking in my direction because I had the wind at my back. And then she's cranking her neck like this. And I'm going, well, this is interesting. She's not looking at me though. She's looking past me over my right shoulder. Well, this is interesting. And then I'm watching now because that's when they'll potentially lift. And sure enough, about 5 minutes later, she's looking again like this, and then she lifts. And one of the frustrating things with the camera is that the autofocus sometimes will grab a piece of grass that's between you and the bird because it grabs something that's really crisp. And so in the initial shots, but then she come out a little bit, and I got her flying right by me. I'm thinking, this is really weird, and I look over my shoulder, and there's a fox behind me in the field. And she was concerned about the fox, not me. So, yeah, there's a few of those like that.
Woody, what is your goal with taking all of these thousands, I would imagine by now, pictures that you're keeping? I know you do a calendar every year. Is there some goal beyond that?
I think it's kind of like, because I forget how I worded it during COVID, but taking images to lift up my neighbors or something to that effect. So I just wanted to, because we all go through life and we're kind of like, we have blinders on. Even when you're driving, you don't see a lot of stuff. So I want to kind of like just keep presenting that beauty that surrounds us. Because I learned after, a number of years ago, I learned that on the island here, this island is the best place in the world for owls. Like, we live in the best place. I've met photographers that have come from Poland. It was their life dream to come to this island to take pictures of snowies and short-eared owls and other owls. I'm thinking, wow, I live here. So goal, yeah, that's kind of the goal. I like to post all the time on Facebook, and I post on an owl site in Australia called the Owl Pages, which has 1.6 million followers. So that means there's lots of people that see the images, and it's an educational site, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get lots of views, and being a Pisces, I like to get attention, so that's cool. Wow.
I think you may have just explained it. I was wondering, what about the animals there? Lovely picture of the fox. Do you prefer to take the
I think it's
Is
just what
there a
we have,
difference?
right? So like, you know, like I've had instances where I've caught images of coyotes. Again, it's kind of rare, right? So because it's rare because a coyote has a very good smeller. Like the wind is over my shoulder, so that where I'm pointing is usually not where the coyote. But there was a coyote that walked. Mark has the farm next to Wayne's that I shoot towards, and in the morning, and the coyote walked the other side of the fence line and was walking along. This is like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. in the morning, and you know, it's doing this, and knew something was not right, but I couldn't get the image because it was the other side of all the grasses and stuff. But just the experience. So, yeah, you know, there's opportunities maybe to go up to Alaska and catch the brown bears or the grizzlies, hunting different, the salmon and whatnot. But, you know, I have it pretty good here. Yes,
Could you say a word about the editing process?
Sure.
And how you go about that?
yeah. So, a lot of people don't know this, but when you take your phone and you snap a picture with your phone, the phone grabs what's called a raw image, and that's like a negative in the film world. That's like a negative. So it's just the basic information, and that raw image has all of the information on it. But your phone, between the time of taking it and what you see on the screen, it edits it. You can call it Photoshop, but it changes it. And so that's the interesting thing. We all think that we take our phone and go like this, that we took the image. You did, you captured the image, but the phone takes it and changes it, improves the color, possibly even sharpens it, and whatnot. It doesn't crop it, but it does everything else. So this camera does the same thing. So I shoot in RAW, which is the largest file, has all the information in it. As an example, if you take a picture with the camera, you have everything from shadows to bright light. Well, lots of times when you take the picture, the shadows are fairly dark, but if the picture is exposed properly in the camera, all that information is in those shadows. So in post-processing, I can bring that out. So I can bring the light up on that area. So that's where the art comes in. At least that's what I feel about the art. But you got to be careful. You can't take it too far. It can't look unnatural or whatnot. But all of the software now will improve the detail. But it still comes back to the original image. And for the longest time, I worked on exposure, and that's a really tough one because if the owl's exposed properly, you grab all the information. If it's not all there. No matter what you do, you won't pull it out. So you take your images and you go through them. So there's more time spent after you grab the image relative to a particular image doing that. And then you get to the point, how do you present the image? And my story, there are all these World Photography Awards, and there's one, the World Nature Awards, I think it's called, where they tour them around all the museums. And I think it was the ROM that shows a tour of these images, right? And Mary Pat said, Woody, you gotta go see this. I said, oh, great. And so I walk into the display area, and all the images are electronic. And I went, wait a minute. I could see these images on my computer at home. They look the same, they're just smaller, right? This isn't quite right. Because you lose, like one of the first things I learned from Peter and Margaret was, framing, what is it printed on? That's printed on metal, and it's a satin metal, so, how does the light hit it? What does it do when the light hits it in different directions? And so we're kind of losing that, in a way, if we're doing that in a museum where they're displaying those images. Obviously, it was easier for them because they can tour around the world and they don't have to ship frames or anything, but it makes a big difference. So I think about all that stuff when I'm, putting a piece in the island show at the lodge, right? That's all, you think about that. Okay, how is it framed? And will the image even print out, the colors, whatnot? So there's so many dimensions to it, which makes it fascinating because it's learning. I don't think you ever stop learning because everything changes. Photoshop is a monthly, you pay by the month for Photoshop, and it just gets bigger and more complex. You're able to do different things, so you're always learning, which is kind of neat.
I'd like to know where your pictures of feral pussycats are.
Sorry, I'm a dog person.
They're wild.
Oh, feral,
I had a
feral.
question way back there, did you get your answer, Carl, or
Yes,
you had your hand up a while ago and I knew they couldn't see you in the dark back there?
I think it's funny that Carl and others ask technical questions because I was told, don't get too technical.
Oh.
And I can't quite see Judy's face. I can't see whether she's sleeping or not, but then I know that I've gone over the edge.
I don't even understand the explanations.
So I have a question, but I can't raise my hand. Is it a direct lens or a telescopic one?
No, that's a direct lens, yeah.
Okay. So what happens when the bird gets really close?
Well, this is good, like this will focus to 17 feet, so it's not usually
Oh,
gonna get-
okay. So 17 to what?
No, 17 feet away. When a bird comes within 17 feet, then it's out of focus.
Okay, gotcha.
You get it? So
Closer.
Yeah, gotcha.
you could set it up from 17 feet to infinity. And it has, this lens has autofocus, so it has two motors in it. They're linear motors, and one is working with the other, so like it's fast. So if the camera locks on to the flying bird, it will lock on as the bird's flying towards you. The key is to find it, right? Because it's such a long lens. If I pointed it to the back of the room, it would probably only highlight the square in the top of the door back there, the little wee frame.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
So that's the challenge. You get practiced at it. This is at the top of the lens, so I use that as to grab the direction anyway. But lots of times, if you can grab the bird way far away, you've got a chance. Carl.
You ever tried for smaller birds like warbirds and the like?
Yep. Yeah. I was down to Point Pelee, but I was just a little bit early for them coming through. I think they might be coming through now.
Yeah.
It's fascinating when you're even just sitting in this outfit, I'm down low in the bushes, and you sit long enough and you don't move, you get smaller birds coming in close. And sometimes I don't get shots of them because they're too close. They're literally hopping around the branches, and I'm just amazed by it and kind of, it's kind of the magic, right? You're hanging out there, and these birds are right there, and they're just doing their thing. So, but I guess the owls and whatnot, they're a little more exciting, to me. But
More dynamic.
more dynamic. But then I take pictures of flowers too.
And grass growing.
Where's the technology going? Is that going to be a little less clunky in a few years, and you'll
You
be
mean the
able to
lens
carry it?
itself?
Yeah, the whole kind of contraption that
I
you now
don't,
have to
the
deal with.
cameras get smaller.
Right,
So this is a Sony camera, and so it's a bit smaller and a bit lighter, and the lenses that make them lighter. So they're getting lighter with the technology. The lenses are finer made, I guess, and maybe they don't have to be as heavy. I think it can only go so far. But as far as technology in the camera, yeah, that's going, just keeps going. So Now, there's a camera out, and there's been this technology out for a few years where, you remember the shot of the owl lifting from the post? If I put the if the new camera, if you put the camera on it and you're pressing the back button, which is the focus, and it grabs and it focuses on the owl, and then the owl takes off. Well, by the time my brain tells me that the owl is lifted and I push the shutter, it's already out where you saw it. Except the new camera is recording images all the time. You go back half a second and it grabs the bird as it's just lifting the feet, maybe just off the post, so you have a selection. That's the technology. That it just keeps going. And I'll end with an AI story, this is scary too. But so I always enter the Sony World Photography Awards, which is around the world, right? And this is like top-notch photography. And Peter and Margaret always encouraged me to enter that type of stuff for galleries and whatnot. And so I entered. So last year, this one gentleman won the best picture in the world, and it was like a $5,000 prize. And he came to the judges afterwards and he said, I can't accept this award. And they said, why not? He said, because I went on my computer and I described the picture that I wanted. And it was basically of two older women. One was standing behind the other, and the one behind in the background had a particular look on her face, and it was telling a story. The computer generated the whole image.
Well, good for him.
Yeah, but he can't, because he wanted to educate everyone to say, this technology is there, right?
He'll be writing your cut lines for you.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of scary. Mark?
Yeah, so I'm curious as to where your mind's at with this, because you're out there for 2 hours, it's freezing cold and all that, but you're telling it, you sort of made two statements a bit contradictory. You said it's almost like meditation, and then you said that you've got 5 seconds to get the meadowlark on the post when it turns up. So how do you kind of reconcile on other days when you realize you just haven't got the focus to carry on?
Well,
doing
that
it?
day of the meadowlark, so I was there for 2 hours. I was in the blind you're familiar with. And sometimes you get up in the morning or because the weather's kind of crappy, you go, I don't want to go. So I go out and I do catch that image, but I only look for one good image. You know, I like to find one good image, a shot. So it is meditative. So you're sitting there, you initially sit down, it's like your man cave in the woods, right? You're just there, right? And everything's happening around you and you're just watching. Sometimes you're watching the sun come up, the birds start to sing, you're listening, and I don't know, it's just easy to do for me. I have meditation in my background, so maybe it comes natural, but it doesn't freak me out. And if I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there for an hour and a half and I haven't got anything, then I'm going over in my mind the images I caught the day before or the day before that, and going, yeah, that image might work. And then I'll catch motion, because that's what I look for. I don't wear my glasses because the viewfinder is set up with a diopter in it that will correct my vision. But when I'm just looking over top of the camera, my vision isn't that bad, but I look for motion. So I catch motion, you know, I'm there and I'm focused to see what's going on. The other thing I do is when you're in the blind, I decide roughly how far away I want the autofocus to start at. So I'll have that fence post that's way over there, I'll focus on it, so that means the lens is ready at that distance. And chances are then it gives the camera and the lens a chance to autofocus on a bird that takes flight, or you saw the short-eared owl where I did a multiple image of where it's flying, dives and hits the wool. Well, that's, you know, you've got to be relatively close because that happens in a split second, right? Like I don't even know I have those shots until I go and review the images. Like it's happening so fast. All I'm doing, get that camera and lens on that moving bird, and hitting an autofocus, and then it's focusing 60 times a second. So there's the computer in there going, it's in focus, it's in focus, you know, like it's just grabbing it, including the eye of the bird, right? So, and it puts a little green square on the eye if you could slow down what you're seeing through the viewfinder. So you have that technology now to work with, so that's exciting in itself, but it gives you the opportunity to capture magical images.
I've called Amherst Island home, I think, longer than most people here, so I think I can comment on this. You said that Amherst Island is the world standard for places to see owls at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's what Fred Lemire told me.
I was an adult before I ever saw an owl over here.
Just wasn't looking.
Well, maybe I've been fed a line of bull.
Well, no, owls, Amherst Islanders, the only thing they wouldn't kill was robins.
Oh, so they were shooting owls?
They were shooting everything.
Everything that moved, eh?
That's right, I was an adult before I saw Canada goose.
Well, they're not doing a very good job now with the Canada.
Or the cormorants.
Yeah.
I was more than an adult before I saw cormorants. I was almost an adult.
Well, cormorants, yeah, they really, yeah. Owls, I don't know. Like I talked to a photographer friend, a longtime friend from up in Perth, and he's been coming 20 years to the island, and he was spotting great horned owls and whatnot back then. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know back 40 years.
Do you have a
Yeah, you wanna
favorite
go back
spot
60s.
around?
Favorite spot? I kind of move around a little bit because of what's going on, but I go into the Kingston Field Naturalist site at the end. I also go into the marsh. There's a huge marsh on the island that most people don't even know about, but it's only accessible through private land. So, so it's nice. I rely on relationships that I've developed in the past, having worked here, to be able to get access to some of these spots. So you have the marsh. I don't know whether anybody realizes this, but next time you go to the fishing village and you're coming back from the fishing village and you know that turn, that sharp
Yeah.
turn,
Yeah.
look over into the marsh and you'll see an eagle's nest that's half the size from here to the wall. It's that big, up in the tree. And it's been there for a few years now.
Yeah, there were it was a great blue heronry. At one time, you'd get about 20 great blue nests in those trees. And then gradually things changed, and then one day I saw ears sticking out of one of the great blue heron's nest, and it was a great horned owl.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the great blues didn't like the neighbors when the eagles moved in. They took over one of the great blue nests and just kept building it up and up and up. And
I can tell you that all the most of the local farmers I know really respect the birds and the owls and stuff. So they don't let the birders that are coming to the island know, especially during this time of year when the owlets are out there and whatnot, just to protect them and stuff.
11 different species of owls have been seen and recorded on Amherst Island. But you don't see them all year round, and you don't see them every year, like
And only
this
maybe one snowy owl spotted this past winter.
year. Yeah.
But the year before, then maybe only 12 or 13, maybe tops.
And then one Christmas bird count, we got 50.
Yeah.
So it depends. Depends
Yeah,
on
it's
the
a
bulls.
crapshoot.
You can stand at the end of the second concession and look around and see 30 that one year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right where the machinery was for the turbine was right at the corner of the second, and that there were 25 in that one field. They were sitting on the equipment, on the bulldozers. They were just sitting there. I think the ground stirred up the voles, and they were busy. But you've got questions, and I know that Woody has some of his wonderful pictures out here you want to look at. So ask questions of Woody and give Karen and Isla and I about 5 minutes, and we have refreshments for you out here.
Great.